Welcome to the Cemoh Marketing Podcast with me, your host, Simon Dell. Very quickly, let's get all the bullshit out of the way. Cemoh.com if you want to find out more about us, CEMOH.com. If you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn, Simon at Cemoh.com as well. Cemoh does fractional marketing people, primarily fractional marketing, fractional CMOs. That's what we do all over Australia, hopefully eventually all around the world. Come and find out about us. If you've got any questions, let me know. Let's get that out of the way because I'm excited to get into this today. I have in a man who looks like he's sitting in a shed, who I've known for a very, very long time. He's highly entertaining. He's the CEO of Maleny Dairies. Welcome to the show, Stephen Tait.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for having me on.
How the devil are you?
I'm very well, Simon. I'm sitting in a shed in green pasture, surrounded by cows. What a better way to spend my Friday?
Oh, mate, I couldn't think of a better way to spend your Friday. Now you've got a long, checkered, colourful past. There's probably 1,000 things I can ask you. You and I have done an interview before. So I'm going to sort of, I'm going to try and find the edited highlights of what is has been looks like a fun and fantastic career. But very quickly, let's start with a little bit about the dairy. Tell me about that. Tell me where, for all the people that don't know where it is. Tell us a little bit about that.
Maleny Dairies is based on the Sunshine Coast, obviously in Maleny. The Sunshine Coast in Queensland. It's a family-owned business. It's been owned since 1948, still owned by the original family. They produce high-quality dairy products that are not limited but are exclusively milk, yogurts, cream, and custards.
Yep.
So we don't go into the ice cream and the butters and the various other. We're very, very much focused on these core products.
Yep.
And we pride ourselves on the freshness and the quality of these products, and more importantly, where we get our milk from. And we're very, very focused on supporting the local economy and the dairy farmers around us. So yeah, it's been going since 1948, and I came in 3 years ago.
And we'll talk about that, because that itself, just what you inherited. Not to suggest anybody previous was doing anything wrong, but what you inherited was a challenge, I would say. But we'll get to that in a second. I just also want to explain to everybody that whilst you have cows out there, Maleny Dairies doesn't have their own cows, do they? So you're effectively cowless.
Yep.
But someone else owns all the cows, don't they?
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation because everybody seems to think I'm a farmer. And I'm not a farmer. I mean, I was the guy that bought a male and a female cow from my own farm and phoned the breeder up 6 months later and said, "When can I start them breeding?" And he said, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about." And I said, "Well, I bought a male and a female, so when did they start breeding?" And he said, "They're not." And I said, "Why?" He says, "You bought a steer." So,
right.
Which is basically a cow without testicles. So I'm not really good at farming, but I'm good at processing and manufacturing.
Yeah.
So we are simply a manufacturer of raw material that comes from 12 dairy farmers, all within our footprint, within 80 kilometres. But we do have our factory smack bang in the middle of a dairy farm. So
Gotcha.
We have the luxury of having Guernsey cows wandering around us every day, which is phenomenal. It's a great view every morning to look out the window and see them. Great.
So, and I think that's probably a lot of that's one thing a lot of people don't understand about the supply chain of milk and cows is that, there's two steps in there. There's the farmers generally aren't processing their own milk. They obviously milk the cows and then send the milk to you. Yep. So, and again, just for everybody's benefit, because this is the sort of shit we're taught in schools, but what do you do to the milk?
We process it, we pasteurize it, we take all the nasty bugs out of it, and we create a formula that creates either a cream or a custard or a yogurt. We focus very much on the purity of the product. So, for example, when you see on the shelf a pure cream, in many cases it's not pure cream.
Right.
The fat content in that cream can have additives in there and gelatin, to thicken it up. Ours is 54% fat. Right. Literally, you can use a fork and whip it once and it turns into butter. It's that pure. So we focus very much on keeping the product as pure as we possibly can. Obviously, if we're introducing a lactose-free product, then we have to add in an element of lactate to change its makeup. Yeah. But we basically bring the milk in the back of a big tanker, we shove it in a vat, and we put it through a pasteurizer, and we pour it in a bottle. And this is about as technical as I can get. And then we put it in a crate, and we send it to a distributor, and he sends it to the customer. Yeah.
So again, that's something that I don't think many people understand in this route from getting milk out of a cow into your cup of tea in the morning or your cup of coffee in the morning. There's 4 groups of people in that process. There's the farmer, then there's the processor, which is you, then there's distributor, and then at the other end is the supermarket, the corner store, the IGA, whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And the challenge obviously is that all of them have a cost associated with it and need to make a profit and so on and so forth.
And it's interesting, Simon, because it's, as I said at the start, I've only been here 3 years, right? And I've never milked a cow in my life, right? But it's the same principle, is that the supply chain of a product, if you look at every element of that and say, well, how can I make a better value out of that chain? Yeah. So we specifically target local farmers. We can get milk from anywhere, but we specifically target the local farmers. We pay them the highest price we possibly can so that they give us the purest product and the thickest fat content. And that in itself is the essence of our brand. What is the quality right at the beginning of the value chain? Then how quickly can we make that into a great product that customers want? And then how do we get it to them at a price point that makes it an affordable product? Yeah. And that's our challenge, and the truest sort of value chain as well. How do we get it from the cow to the consumer to give it as long a shelf life as we possibly can, so it's not turning over every 3 or 4 days? So it's really an element of breaking down every element of that chain and saying, well, how do we get greater value into that for the consumer?
And how far are you going now? Because, I mean, obviously for those that live on the Sunshine Coast, they know your brand. Ever since you and I did that event together, we've never had anything else in this house other than Maleny Dairies milk. But how far is your reach at the moment?
Yeah. So when I joined 3 years ago, we used a distributor that operated within our footprint of the Sunshine Coast, per se. And we were delivering direct to store. So our milk would come off the back line, we'd put it in a truck, and it would go to a retailer within probably 80 kilometres of here. Yeah. Now, if you're selling to Woolworths, each individual store was having to phone our distributor and say, can I have a crate of milk every day? Now, if you were in Gympie and you wanted our milk, which is only 100 kilometres up the road, we couldn't deliver it to you because we didn't have the chain to get there. Yeah. So we went to Coles and Woolies and said, what's a better way of doing this? What's the best way of getting our product out? And they said, just send it all to us. Why are you going to individual stores? Yeah. And so now I was looking at figures this morning. We made the strategic decision to put all of our milk in the back of a truck, and we send it to an independent distributor who looks after all of our independent retailers and IGAs and things. Yeah. That's about 30% of our business. And we spoke to Coles and Woolies and said, can we just send it to your warehouse? And then they distribute it. As a result of that action, Woolworths volumes grew by about 25% as a result of that. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean we were selling more milk in that store that we were delivering to straight. So we are now all the way down to Armadale, and we're all the way up to Cairns. Yeah. The challenge I've got is it's one thing to distribute it to them and put it on the shelf, but who in Cairns knows about Maleny?
Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm relying on somebody walking up to a wall of white milk and go, I'm going to buy that one. And it's tough when you're a small family business, and you get handed all this phenomenal growth opportunity, and we don't have the money to support it to the volume that we'll need to be to get people to buy our product.
Yeah.
So we're pretty well spread now. But
so talk to me about the brand then, because I mean that sort of that challenge talks directly to the brand. I mean, you operate in a world, I guess, to a degree, where milk is milk. People are walking into a store, it's whatever, people, maybe it's almost a functional product for some people. They don't care the label on the front. If it's white and it's in a carton, they'll buy it. How do you make it stand out? How do milk companies be better brand managers?
There's an interesting challenge around it, is that it's not even so much how do you get them to buy our milk, it's how did they value that purchase.
Right.
And there's a reason that supermarkets put our milk at the very back of the store. Like 97% of people buy a milk every day. And the supermarkets put it at the very back, which is basically a magnet to draw people in.
Yeah.
And then their price point is what makes the next decision in some cases. And we are all competing to a market, regardless of who our brand is, effectively trying to demonstrate that our product is worth more than the consumer is currently paying for it. So before we get into actually determining how do they buy mine over theirs, my biggest challenge is if a consumer values a 2-litre bottle of milk that's been milked by a farmer twice a day and getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week, and he values it at $5, nobody makes any money. And basically, the only people that are benefiting from it are the retailers who are driving traffic into their store to get somebody to walk right through the back. Because you then, after you pick up your milk at $5, you go down and pick up a can of Coke at $370 and pay $5 for it. Like we've got a challenge as a product to convince people that milk is a far greater valuable commodity than it is. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge, especially for my brand, is that we are a premium product.
Yeah. So
we're at the top end of the market. So an average 2-litre bottle of milk from our competitors can go from anything from $4 to $4.50. And we're up at $5.86. Now there's a reason for it. And this is our challenge, is that how do you convince somebody to pay up to 20% more for my milk against somebody else's product?
Yeah.
So there is a big cooperative brand, which will remain nameless. It turns over $600 million a year, makes enormous amounts of product, and spends a shitload on television advertising convincing everybody to buy their product because it's supporting local farmers. And then you've got us, who's paying 15% more to the farmers than they are.
Yeah.
And supporting hyper-local communities as a result of it. But it's in a white bottle. It's a product that looks white. It's exactly the same. Yeah. But theirs is 20% cheaper. So, ironically, our brand has this amazing pull from a consumer that people pick it up and walk away and even look at the price. In my market, in my home market, people look at us as being a brand that they should support because it's on the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah.
Now, as the CEO, my challenge is buy my milk because we are local doesn't work in Cairns.
No.
And so we're a victim of our own success. We've built our brand being based on the authenticity of the owners. Our owners have been in this business for 25 years. They are phenomenal brand ambassadors. They're on, out there all the time, and they're real farming type people, and that works in my footprint. But if I'm sitting in front of a major retailing group and saying you need to stock my product in Sydney, they're going to say to me, "Why?" So I'm going to be limited if all I've got is because we're local. So it's how do I compete in my growth, not how do I compete now? Because our brand Providence is kept us successful in our footprint, but we're ambitious to grow that. But how do I become King Island? Nobody goes buy King Island because it's local. And, we all go in and buy King Island cheese, even though they're just up for sale. But King Island has managed to take its brand and make it ubiquitous to quality, dairy, fresh, all over the place. My challenge, Simon, is that I'm a small family business with no fucking money to support the growth.
Yeah, I mean, and then the challenge, some of the things you've said there as well about, the the quality of the milk. You look at the local area. It's a beautiful area. Everything's green around the Sunshine Coast. It feels like a healthier area. I'm trying to find the right word for it, but but there's other people that can play on those messages as well. I mean, you're not the only milk brand in Australia that has that sort of Providence story as well.
Yeah.
I that's an interesting challenge, and we're not going to solve that challenge. You and I talking now. It'd be interesting if someone else out there from a brand background sees that and goes, okay, how about this kind of, these kind of messages? Because I guess if you tap the right one there, people in Sydney and Melbourne are going to want that product.
I think my challenge, and I'm not a marketing expert like you, I'm just like a dumb salesman. At the end of the day, milk is very much a local product.
Yeah.
But soft dairy isn't. So cheese, butter, new products of kefir.
Yeah.
All of these new product ranges can cross multiple boundaries because they're now you can keep them in the fridge longer. Milk is a product that you can churn through pretty quickly. But in Queensland, for example, there is not a major manufacturer of butter.
Yeah.
So creating most of our butter now comes from New Zealand, unfortunately, because we shut down all the butter factories and made them into art studios. Right? So I cannot find anybody to manufacture butter for me in Queensland.
Yeah.
I don't have somebody who can make me a kefir product. So as much as our factory is set up for the products we make right now, product innovation in itself will help us grow our footprint.
Yeah.
Because it can appeal to an audience or a market. The growth market right now is protein protein-based product. Look at the amount of space that's getting taken up on the shelf now by protein.
Yeah.
So I've got an enormous opportunity to create products with increased levels of protein, like a 20% yogurt or 25% yogurt, or a protein drink that aids sports recovery. It allows me to extend my brand without it being seen as a local Providence product.
Yeah.
But that in itself involves new pieces of equipment, new pieces of technology, investment in branding and advertising.
Yeah.
And it's tough when you're a small business that you can see this big opportunity and you think we could do that. Like we are a dynamic small company that could really create a product, a premium product, to deliver significant profit for us. But we have to go all the way through our value chain and say, well, how do we build an ROI on that? So my frustration is that we have spent the last sort of 3 years getting us ready for that growth.
Yeah.
But in your opening remarks about the challenges I faced, we're a family business.
Yeah.
And family businesses operate in a family manner.
Yeah. And
coming from my background, you do have to have a corporate lens over the way we manufacture nowadays. It's not, you just can't do it the way we used to do things. So
there's not, in that sort of business, there's not this, unending pot of R&D investment that you can throw at these things, because because your margins are still, small. If you're building software and your margins are at 90%, you can sit there and take a gamble and throw money into ideas and all those kind of things. But when you're running a business that so many people are reliant on from a local economy perspective, from a jobs perspective, and a heritage business that's been running, 90 years now, it's I mean, I'm sure it's not in this position, but an incorrect investment isn't necessarily going to kill the business, but it's going to hurt the business, and it's going to take time to recover.
Yeah, you're correct. There are the small margins that we get on milk.
Yeah,
and we do. And again, this is all open, so I don't mind discussing it because it's all public. Yeah. We pay our farmers just over a dollar. I think it's $1.05 a litre.
Yeah,
is what the average farmer will earn. Now, if you're doing 1 million litres a year, it's a reasonable income. It's not profit, but it's a reasonable income. But if I'm paying $1.05 for a litre, and then I've got to ship it to my factory, then I've got to process it, then I've got to put it in a bottle, then I've got to put it in a crate, then I've got to put it in a warehouse truck, then I've got to pay a distributor, and then I've got to give margin to a retailer. Yeah. And you walk into the supermarkets and there's a bottle of milk there for $1.80.
Yeah.
And you go, how does anybody make money at that? And therefore, how much investment would you make in that brand to actually help grow its volume when the margins are so slim that it's a challenge to justify it? Now, you'd be horrified to discover how much we spent on marketing last year. Like horrified. I think I've probably spent more with the local, football club than we spent. So, and that's our challenge, is that our margins are so slow. But we're getting there because we've now got our product range getting there. We've launched in the last 18 months lactose-free milk, lactose-free cream, sour cream. We've revamped our yogurts. So our business is still growing now, but the real growth opportunity, we've had to sort our distribution out. So we've done that. We've got our supply chain secured. So we feel like we're on the starting line.
Yeah.
We feel like we've cleaned everything up and we're all ready to go. And now it is NPD, and now it is new outlets, and it is a new product range that can allow us to generate greater profits.
Yeah. The story of your distribution woes, I'm not going to go into, because that itself is probably there's probably half an hour conversation in that, and there's probably some legals around that probably we don't want on a podcast. But what I there's a couple of things that I remember when you told me this story, because I think I've heard this story a couple of times now, that never occurs to me, and I don't think it occurs to a lot of people, right? Was one of the things that you said to me was, if things don't, because you remember you were going individually to Woolworths and Coles and things like that, right? If the distributor, if the product doesn't arrive at Coles and Woolworths at the right time on the right day, and I want to stress, this isn't a slight on Coles and Woolworths. They're running big businesses. They need things to be there in an allotted time windows. That if your product missed an allotted time window, that it could sit in the back, not in the fridges facing the customers for days on end. Yep. Is that was the case? Did I get that right?
Yep. Because they run a business, and each store, and we all have been in supermarket stores, and you're right, it's not a slight against them. They have a process, and they run their business to that process. If we can't fit into that process, that's our problem, not theirs. So when you walk in a Coles and Woolworths or an IGA, they have a roster of staff that says we fill it this time, we fill it that time. If your product doesn't land at that back door at the right time, they take it, they put it in the cold room, and it won't be until the next shift that you'll be loaded. And the biggest insight that I got into my brand when I first started was I would walk around all these supermarkets and retailers, and I looked at our social media, and we've got an enormous following on Facebook. Like, we have no marketing expertise here. I've got a guy who answers the phone doing my social media, right?
Yeah.
So the biggest comments were, we love your product when we can get it.
Yeah.
So there was something wrong with the way we were getting our product to market.
Yeah.
And such was the allure of our brand that people wanted it and we just couldn't get it to them. So that's why we had to change our distribution methodology.
Yeah.
And I think it's been the best thing we've done because it's got us that growth and it's got our brand presence now on shelf. So I have more confidence to look at, right, okay, how do we shift more product now? How do we actually get more shelf space? So it's taken 3 years to get us to this point.
Yeah. The other thing I remember you talking about, which I want to discuss, was the fact that the cows. You're not a product that you're not a business that can sit there and control the supply to a degree, because cows generate milk, and cows generate milk in differing seasons, don't they? They don't they don't generate the same amount of milk every day, every month throughout the year. It's cyclical, isn't it? So you're having to deal with the fact that sometimes they don't produce enough and sometimes they produce too much. And there's absolutely fuck all you can do about
it. Honestly, it was the biggest shock of my life that if I sell 100 litres of milk a week, I go to a farmer and say, can you give me 100 litres a week? And he goes, yeah, we can do that. But he annualizes it and he goes, well, I'll give you 5,000 litres. And I go, oh, that's fantastic. And so for the first few weeks, I get my 100 litres and I sell my 100 litres. Yep. And then all of a sudden he rocks up with 200 litres. And I go, I only wanted 100. He goes, can you tell the cow? So, so there's no taps on cows, which I was horrified on. So it's called spring flush, which is a new technical term for me, where cows actually produce more milk during springtime because that's when they've calved and things like that. So they overproduce. So there is no consistency in the supply. The only consistency is expect it to increase by 50% when you least expect it. Yeah. And it happens literally over a couple of weeks. You're just happily trotting along at 100 litres a week and selling 100 litres a week. And then all of a sudden there's a massive spike of excess milk. Yeah. And you can't get rid of it. You're like, what are you going to do with it? Because it'll go off. Yeah. So we end up having to sell that product to somebody else who then makes it into cheese. But I've sold it to him cheaper than I bought it because I have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And his business model is based on buying cheap milk.
Yeah.
So he only has to make his milk during spring flush and he's laughing. Yeah. And then it gets to winter and then it becomes 50 litres a week because the cows don't like producing milk during the winter. So it's quite a challenge, I have to say.
I was going to say that, and that's probably, you think of all the retail, manufacturing retail products out there, be it food, be it whatever. I would probably say 99.9% of can control their supply. If they don't, clothing manufacturers, I would say most food manufacturers, and sure, there's some, I'd imagine there's some other foods like, potentially apples and fruit and things like that. But even to a degree, they can probably predict how many apples are coming off a tree at a certain time of the year.
If you plant 10 trees, it's going to come into fruit for this period of time. Yep.
Yeah. And it's gonna produce this average amount of apples, so you can sit there and scale, backwards and forwards. But
this is a more technical business than I ever anticipated. I thought I was just going to turn up like Ernie the milkman and sell milk. I didn't think it was going to be this hard. Nobody told me that I had to actually be a Wall Street trader to deal with the volumes of milk that I was getting dealt with whenever they felt like it. My biggest frustration is I watch the television and I see, the prices of lettuce are now $13 because it's rained.
Yeah.
And people go, yeah, well, I like lettuce. Right. Milk, it's seasonal. I can't say to the consumer, sorry, your milk's $10 this week because the cows won't produce enough. Because we've educated the public that milk's just milk and you just have to pay a couple of dollars for it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the problem.
And the other thing that just to wind up this part of it was that I I think you said this when we chatted last time, was that the difference in price. If people really want to help farmers, go and buy these products that are coming not direct from the farmer, but are supporting the farmers. So you said you pay them 15% more than other people would pay them. So there's a clear message there. If you want to go and support local farmers on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, go and buy your milk. And do you know what? I've completely forgotten where I was going with that. That's that observation.
We did some research last year about the economic impact of milk within our region, and it's not just about supporting the farmer. It's actually the whole supply chain that supports that farmer. It's the mechanic, it's the electrician, it's the irrigation specialist. So for every 30,000 litres of milk we produce, that employs another one person.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but it keeps. I think we had 10 years ago we had 720 dairy farmers in Queensland.
Yeah.
We've now got 270.
Yeah.
And it's because consumers don't see the price of milk as being, and we do get complaints. If we put the milk up by 10 cents, we get complaints about it. And you're like, seriously, these people are on their knees at a farm.
Yeah.
And I'm dealing with farmers who are maybe 50-year-old. Do you honestly think their kids are going to go and turn up and do that for 7 days a week for $1?
Yeah.
It's just not sustainable. And one day we're going to wake up and go, you know what? We'll be buying our milk in powder format from across the seas.
Yeah.
And we'll be reconstituting it. And that's something I'm absolutely determined won't happen with us.
And that's where I was going with that original statement, was when you're going in, and I go in and do the weekly shop or the fortnightly shop for myself and my two boys, and I would come out of there having spent, some weeks $250, sometimes even $300 if I'm, buying everything. I look at the difference between buying a milk that would support, local farmers, is making maybe a $2, $3 difference to the shop to the amount of money I'm spending. And then I think, and that's one thing. And the other thing I think about is some of the money that I spend on shitty processed brands that I shouldn't be spending high amounts of money on, like the big global brands, the Cokes and the Nestle's of this world. I just go, the Cadbury's. Why am I quibbling over $1 in a milk or $2 in milk when I'm going and wasting $6 on a packet of biscuits that will last? When you look at it like that, you just go, just buy the best milk that you can that's going to help the local people.
Do you remember the old days where they had, was it the Pepsi challenge or the Coke challenge or whatever it was?
Yeah.
If you put down a litre of milk and a litre of bottled water next to each other, and didn't put a price on it, do you honestly think somebody would say, I'm going to pay $5 for that water and I'm going to buy $2 for that milk?
Yeah.
Because I don't think people think about it. They walk up and buy I'm very conscious of criticising it, but water manufacturers are actually just producing plastic. It's just a plastic bottle they're selling with a brand on it. And shame on us for not being able to articulate the fact that my wife will walk in and think nothing of spending $5.50 on a pump bottle of water in the BP service station, but will come out of the supermarket and say, I see your milk's gone up in price. Oh yeah, sorry Pet, it's $2.40, right? And I'm really sorry that you've had to pay half the price.
Yeah.
So, and then I go to the flavour side of it, and this is the thing. Again, I'm probably coming across as a more frustrated marketeer than anything, because I create amazing products.
Yeah.
So our milk actually tastes like milk.
Yeah.
It has higher fat content than everybody else's. In Australia, you can call your product a full fat product at 38% fat.
Yeah.
So 3.8% fat.
Yeah.
So you can claim to have a full fat milk at 3.8% fat, and ours is over 4%. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but actually our milk has cream floating on the top of it.
Yeah.
Most milk manufacturers take that off, make it into a cream, and charge $9 a litre for it. Right? And they're left with a raw material of 3.8% fat, which they claim to be full fat, standing next to mine. And I've not taken the fat out of it. Yeah. So that's why we charge our premium. The easiest thing I could do is take the fat off my milk, put it down to 3.8, reduce the price, and compete against them. And then take that fat and make it into something else. And it would destroy the very essence of my brand.
Yeah. I sit and think about what my two, aged 6 and 8, the bottles of, what's the one, the Mr. Beast? No, not the Mr. Beast one. One of those power drinks that's like they go into Woolworths and they go, I want that. Whether it's a Gatorade or a Powerade, but there's another one. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like $4 or $4.20, and it's 500 mils, and it's just it's shit in a bottle, and it's just heavily marketed.
Yeah.
And that they want it. And I mean, to be fair, they drink a lot of milk. They drink milk with their, cereals. They drink milk on its own. They drink milk before they go to bed. So they drink a lot of milk. But them as children aren't seeing the difference between, the fact that that's a more healthy option versus this shit in a bottle that's been heavily marketed, and aren't thinking anything of spending that money. Whereas, as you say, you're getting picked up by increasing your price by 10 cents. It must be incredibly frustrating.
It's dreadful, and I'm probably coming across as a cranky joke, but it really does. I stand in the fridges in supermarkets and ask people why have they just bought that own brand milk.
Yeah.
Versus not just mine, but like a branded product of milk, because these guys are paying the farmers more. Yeah. And yet you'll sign up a petition to say support the farmers, but I'm actually going to choose to not spend $1.50 more to do that. I just God help me as a marketeer. That's why I can't do it. I can't run a campaign that says, "What do you think you're playing at?"
I can imagine how frustrating it is. Look, I'm conscious of time, and I just want to ask you one question, really, around your previous role before you got to the dairy was. In an organisation called CCIQ, which was Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland, and has since undergone.
Qualifies me amazingly for becoming a dairy salesman.
Yeah. Well, I think this is where I kind of see the link, because that business has undergone a rebrand. Different people in charge now, etc., etc. I won't go into that, but you were exposed for a long time looking at Queensland businesses, and my question is that there must have been some things that you learned over that time that you then took into the dairy business. I mean, you saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of Queensland business during that time. What did you learn? I mean, I'm sure you learned a lot, but what are some of the key things you learned doing that role?
Spend less than you make. I think that it's a really good question. I think when I came into this from my corporate background, which I did come from, I came from a newspaper background. CCIQ was very much a subscription-based model of advocacy. It was a content company, effectively. Yeah. And it was about creating a voice for business.
Yeah.
So working with the businesses, the research that I had to carry out ended me up here because I saw consumer changes. So what did I learn? I think being flexible, I think listening to the customer or identifying the customer to create a service or a product. And some businesses had had stayed in their lane, didn't see a trend emerging. And that's how I ended up here. Because I asked my staff at the time, could you find me businesses that are going to be affected by this government policy of this drive for carbon neutrality, this clean emission type, and they set some ambitious targets, but didn't give a pathway to do it. And I thought, why are they doing it? And it must be because the general public are now becoming far more focused on the sustainable conversation or the sustainable part of it. And so I asked my team to bring in a bunch of customers to talk to them about, if you were to, see yourself in 10 years' time, how would you view it through the lens of having a product or a service that now reflects consumers, and what can government do about it? And what I've actually learned, Simon, in that time was how few businesses thought 5 to 10 years out. How few. I love spending time talking to my customers. So I split my week between 30% with my retailers, 30% of my time with my factory, 30% of the time with consumers, because they will tell you what they want, and they'll tell you when they want it, and they'll tell you what price they want it. So during that time, I probably found a lot of businesses that made stuff, and that's how they made it. And it wasn't until something happened that they would then change. In fairness, there was a lot of businesses that were fantastic. I was in awe of them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They were the most inspiring businesses. But even down to how you communicate with your customers, how do you engage with your customers, how often do you ask them what they're looking for? There was very few SMEs that would do that. And in this case, what happened was I came across Maleny Dairies. They would come in every month to talk about their challenges on that journey towards sustainability. And I used to say to them, so do you see this as an investment in your company to become or to create a point of differentiation for your brand? Instead of seeing it as being a risk, do you see it as an opportunity? What could you be doing with your bottles, your packaging? Instead of producing crates, can you put it in cardboard boxes? Anything that creates a narrative around that you're listening to your customer. And so the lesson I learned in that time was spend less than you make, which was a very good one. I think that the one was, are you looking far enough ahead? Are you looking down on the business? Yeah. And what information are you taking in to see what that trend looks like? It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, running a machine and pressing the button and pulling a lever. But realistically, why are you doing it, and who's it for? And who else is doing it better, quicker, faster? And I think that that's the lesson I've learned here, is that this is the most entrepreneurial job I've ever had.
Yeah.
Because every day I am seeing the opportunity to emerging trends, consumer behaviours. I'm seeing retailers changing the way they do things. Coles and Woolly, I think Cole said the other day they're going to reduce the duplication of their products. So instead of having 14 salts on the shelf, they're only going to have 5.
Because that's because they've seen Aldi do that, and Aldi's sitting there going, "Fuck, we'll just have one salt," and everyone's going, "What a great experience Aldi is," and Woolworths is sitting there going, "Why are we bothering giving everyone this choice? What's the,
So what am I going to do to make sure that when they get round to the wall of white, that my product still stays on that shelf?"
Yeah.
And it's because consumer demand drives it. Not because they want to put it on their shelf, it's the consumer demand. So I learned a lot in that sense, Simon. I think the other part of it is what I learned was that government basically had a principle of, unless you can get me re-elected, unless you can, make me popular, unless I can have an announceable, they don't really actually want to listen to small business.
No.
My conversation with government officials over the last 3 years have been interesting, that they keep referring to me as an agricultural business. I'm a processor. I'm a manufacturer.
Yeah.
I need data. I need technology. I need AI. I need to be automated. But you do not hear them talking about dairy processing or food manufacturing. You're talking about making widgets or solar panels or, geez, you can't eat them. And we're losing the primary producers of Australia because we're not investing enough in them. So what I learned was you have to offer government solutions that will actually help them get re-elected as opposed to solve your own bloody problems.
Yeah.
And, buy Queensland. Well, what about looking at your own bloody supply chain, making sure that you're buying Queensland? We went to a government function 4 months ago, with the previous government, which was to meet the locals, and they were serving milk that was owned by a French company, was made down south, and it was 30 minutes from my factory. And you're like, God. Seriously, shoot yourself in the foot, why don't you? So we need to think about what governments are looking to do. Which industries do they think they should be supported? What can I do to be part of that conversation?
Yeah.
And so the one thing that I think we have learned here is that what are the opportunities that are coming down in front of us?
Yeah.
And what can we do to take advantage of it and work with all our stakeholders to create it?
Yeah.
And health and hygiene and sport, and we've got the Olympics coming.
Yeah.
We need to be creating product ranges now.
Yeah. And
then positioning our brand accordingly, away from being just a little local farming processor, good old boys, and being seen as a cutting edge, entrepreneurial, innovative brand that produces healthy products that help you in your recovery, helps age care, going down and actually telling a story of what benefit we offer our different segments, not just we're local and we're really nice people.
I think you and I know because we've had this conversation before, but the sport thing was something that I was opened my eyes a couple of years back when I was speaking to a mutual friend of ours, and I went and did a bit of research, and at the time a guy was working for me who was a semi-pro AFL player, and he would travel to the Gold Coast at weekends, sometimes to Darwin, Adelaide, to play semi-pro AFL, and he'd been told by the performance coaches at his club that at the end of every game, at the end of every training session, they were all to drink, instead of drinking water, they were to drink a litre or whatever it was of milk, a full fat milk. And they said that the performance coaches had made it very clear that was the best recovery drink that they recommended to all their sports players. Forget the Powerades and the waters and all this stuff. It was a litre of milk. And I think that is a story, that is a message that needs to get out there.
And I think that's a brand story that we can tell, but we're going to have to bust out. We're going to have to do something different, and we're going to have to think of a way of articulating it differently, because we are famous, absolutely famous for being a local, high quality product owned by a family, and you should support the farmers. Yeah. That's not going to help me with a 25-year-old athlete that's in Sydney. I need to create something that appeals to the broader audience with my brand. And I'm now probably going to get inundated with 300 chief marketing officers all want to help me. Please don't. I've got no money. Do it for nothing. Do it for results.
Mate, look, honestly, you and I could, we could spend all morning gabbing on about stuff, and maybe we will another time. But look, I think everything you said has been. I've heard it all before, but I love hearing it again, and I think everyone else will enjoy it. So, thank you very much for that. And I guess the last appeal is, if there is anyone in Queensland, not chief marketing officers, because it doesn't need that. But if there's anyone in Queensland that fancies making butter, I guess on an industrial scale, then Stephen would like to hear from you, I suspect.
Absolutely. And again, can I just say, Simon, I love talking to you. You're an incredible marketeer. You're very smart. and I always get something out of the conversations we have. And for the people that are viewing or listening to this, if you don't follow Simon on Instagram, can I strongly suggest you do, because it will brighten your day every single day. It's one of the first things I look at. It makes me laugh. He's got a great sense of humour as well.
Dear. Mate, see, there's the funny thing is I was talking to my internal marketing person yesterday, and we were talking about what my brand is. I go, is it marketing, is it business, or is it just me being stupid online? And she's looking at me going, I can see what she wants to say. And I'm going, I'll take that on board. And anyway, mate, look, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and good luck to you. And obviously, we will bump into each other very soon.
We will. Simon, thanks very much for having us on. Take care.